Hello and welcome to another episode of the Top of Off Cricket Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Henry, and along with me, I got Samuel Braffett and Walter Henry, two old friends. Look, so fellas, a lot has been happening lately with West Indies cricket. There's a lot of moving parts. One of the things that happened recently was the meeting on February 9th, where they met to adopt some of the recommendations with regards to the Webby report. And one of the things that has been making its rounds is the term limits, to the point where we saw former West Indies wicketkeeper batsman Derek Murray had some thoughts on that he doesn't think it is really value added, if you want to put it that way. He had his own, qualms about it. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Walter, we can start with you.
We all want our player to play, right? And so it's because we're not this large man. This is the obvious one, right? A lot of times we just promote our own to the detriment of West Indies cricket. A lot of times. So
let me bring Sammy in. Let me bring Sammy in on that. On what let's get his thoughts on term limits.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Sam.
Kevin, Walter, good to be here again. Now, all right, let me restart again, so you can cut that part out. Kevin and Walter, good to be with you again. When it comes to the recent changes to the governance of West Indies cricket, I have some issues. Now, I must admit that I do not know the nature of the concerns raised by the Barbados Cricket Board and the Guyana Cricket Board, right? So my concerns are simply based on what I would have read in the Webby report. Right? Now, let me contextualize my position by reading from page 20 of the Webby report. Item number 10, which is concerned with the board. And of course, the report largely, was about the structure of the board and the roles of the president and vice president and so on. Now, here is what the Webby report says. Page 20, point number 10. The positions of president and vice president should be redefined and rebranded as chairperson, deputy chairperson, with the respective roles to be established clearly as board specific and non-executive. The terms president and vice president only serve to add to the interpretation of both roles as executive position, right? So what the Webby report is saying clearly is that we don't want to have a situation where the president and vice president are seen as all powerful in a sense, autocratic. And that word autocratic is a word you will find in the report, right? So what the report pushes for is for the president to be removed from day-to-day decision-making at Cricket West Indies. And so what you would have is the CEO of Cricket West Indies, Chris Derring. He would be the person who is pushing West Indies cricket forward. The day-to-day management and decision-making lies with him, right? And to take away from president and vice president that executive type of thing. So yes, of course, you would have, and by the way, not president now, but chairperson is the term that the Webby report wants to have there, right? That chairperson now sets, broad plans for Cricket West Indies. Now, in terms of the term limits, I have no issue with a 3-year term. No issue with that. If we go back to the Webby report, same page 20, item number 8, listen to this. I'm not going to read the entire item, but just the last sentence. There should be a term limit of 2 consecutive terms for the chairperson. According to what I have read, the changes which were made recently do not limit the president or chairperson to 2 consecutive terms. It limits that person to 3 terms, right? Why is it the Cricket West Indies did not go along the lines of what the Webby report is saying? Term limit of 2 consecutive terms. So you still keep the 3-year terms for the chairperson / president, but limit them to 2 consecutive terms.
You would think that would be a detriment to West Indies cricket if they were to, with what was adopted? Do you think that would be a detriment to West Indies cricket?
Put it this way, I don't think so. But a lot of times when we make these decisions, right, it is about looking down the road and what possibilities might arise, right? So if we look at West Indies cricket going back to the decades, I cannot recall where there was a president of the West Indies Cricket Board at that time who served for a decade. The maximum is somewhere around 6 years or something when you add up all the different terms, right? So in West Indies cricket, as we know it, there has never been an issue of a president of West Indies Cricket Board serving for too long, right? As is the case in Guyana, we had a president of the Guyana Cricket Board from the time I was in primary school or high school. Chetram Singh was the president for about 90 years or what happened, right? Good. And to his credit, as far as I can recall, he did a good job. But that's a very long time, right? 2 decades. But in West Indies cricket, that has not been a problem. But what I'm saying here is that with the current governance changes, yes, I see no reason why they should not have followed the Webby report to a T. Okay, 3 years for the chairman or president.
So, Sam, is there anything else to this term limit conversation that has been going on around West Indies cricket that you would like to add?
Yes, there is one more thing I would like to add, and it is not about term limits, but what it concerns is the involvement of women in West Indies cricket. One of the things the Webby report speaks to is that, yes, reduce the size of the board, but you must include women on the board. All right? Our women's cricket is still relatively young, and we want to strengthen that, that part of our cricket. When you look at the recent changes, you will see that there has been some effort to make the situation for women a little better, So, for example, in terms of the treatment of our senior women's team, in terms of the way they fly and in terms of the rooms and so on. But I think beyond that, we need to ensure that we have women on the cricket board. So that's the last point I would want to make in terms of those changes.
I'll start with the last thing first. Absolutely. If you're going to have a women's cricket team, the last thing at a minimum, you would need to have women and how they think. What are their needs? Only they would know exactly what they need. I don't think men should be telling women, okay, well, this is what you need, especially in the sporting arena, because there's too many moving parts, especially with regards to women, with regards to their daily needs and all this kind of stuff. And it's not our place to tell them exactly what they need. And you would need women on the board to advocate for them, right? So I personally think that was a really, really smart move on the part of Cricket West Indies, With regards to the term limits, not sure again, just like you said, why they didn't go with what was recommended. I personally think 6 years is about enough time, right? For someone to get their ideas across. And even if you can't fix the thing, but at least you get the ship sailing in the right direction, right? And leave it in a better place for the next man that comes to pick it up, possibly make it better, and you go from there. Because the last thing you want is someone to become part of the furniture, and that's never a good thing. 9, like we said, that's close to 10 years. That's a decade. That's a very, very long time. Not to say that good things can't happen in all 9 years, but there's also the potential for things to go south because someone has gotten too comfortable, right? So that would be my take on the whole term limits and governance structure, with regards to this whole conversation that's going on right now.
I'd like to throw a different perspective, or it was kind of similar to what I said. I mean, and one of like somebody said, one of our favorite leaders is Lee Kuan Yew, right? And I think that West Indies cricket is in a rebuilding phase. So for this, I think if we have a leader, and I think Shallow and some of the people that they have around, they're adapted to the 21st century thinking in terms of how our organization, a modern sports organization is run. So I don't have a problem in this initial phase of the rebuilding of West Indies cricket if a leader goes for like 9 years. The problem comes in the future, right? Because if we have visionary leaders and if we have leaders that understand that we need to change and we need to have ideas that are different, then it might work to having someone who's probably 6 to 9 years. It might work, but then, as you said, it's in human nature. There's always somebody might become a furniture. So it's these things that we have to think about. And it's West Indies cricket. It's full of bacchanal, as the Trinidadian said, right? So,
but if I may jump in there though, now when we think of the Webby report. Remember Webby, up until a few weeks ago, would have been in charge of Grace Kennedy, right? One of the largest firms in the Caribbean. So he understands these things better than most, right? Now, there are two things here we need to remember. On the one hand, you want continuity of ideas, right? Good ideas. I should say good ideas. You want some continuity, right? On the other hand, you don't want, as both of you would have noted, for someone to become the furniture, so to speak. But if you look at the Webby report, it allows the achievement of both of those things. On the one hand, remember now, to become the chairperson of Cricket West Indies. And I'm using the word chairperson in place of president now, right? Because that's where we want to go.
Yeah.
To become the chairperson, you must be part of the board of directors, right? So if we go back a few years ago, when Skerritt would have been president, Dr. Shallow was just below him as vice president. You see? So I'm saying this to say that Dr. Shallow was contributing to the discourse on the board of Cricket West Indies. So he was part of the whole thing. So it's not as if we're pulling somebody from the board, sorry. It's not as if we're pulling somebody from the road, somebody completely new.
So, Sammy.
To push this thing, right? So we have continuity on the one hand, and at the same time, we say, look, you have 6 years maximum to do your thing. And by the way, if we look at the wording of the document, it is possible that the chairperson for Cricket West Indies could return at some future date. But what we're saying is that for 2 consecutive terms, that is it, and you step aside.
So
Walter, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, this is that's the we said on this point. So we can put for continuity, we can put Basharat next.
So no, know this, you know. All right. I cannot speak to Basharat's capacity, right? I have not, I know of him, right? But I don't know enough to comment on his quality as a director and whether he would make a good chairperson for Cricket West Indies. That's not for me to decide on or to comment on, right? But what I'm saying is, Basharat and whoever else is part of that structure, right? They help with continuity. Good? So you want a balance between continuity and new ideas. Good? And I think the Webby report recognizes that. But in terms of the changes made recently, I do not think Cricket West Indies went far enough. And maybe that is what Derek Murray is talking about, right? I know he has raised concerns, but I can't recall specific things he would have loved to see happen, right? So forgive me for not being able to comment on that. I don't know if Kevin remembers.
Before we wrap it up on this topic, when you say you don't think the Cricket West Indies went far enough or deep enough, what do you really mean?
Far enough in terms of what the Webby report is saying. So, for example, why do we have to continue with president and vice president? The report clearly says chairperson, and to take away any executive or autocratic kind of
powers.
When you say president, you know, you want to make a clean break. So change the names and to clearly define the roles, you know, because part of the problem is, you know, the role of the president of the West Indies Cricket Board, now Cricket West Indies, has not really been clearly defined. It is my understanding, right? And so in that situation, therefore, you've had presidents who would act in very executive and in a worst case scenario, very autocratic ways. So we don't want that. So that's for me, first and foremost, move away from that structure. Move away from that name, right? And then, as I mentioned before, why didn't we go and include women, make it clear that we must have at least one woman or 2 women or something on the board, right? Perhaps at this time in West Indies cricket, I don't know if, you know, there is a woman or women around that might want to be on the board. I don't know. But when I look around West Indies cricket, I see women in various roles, right? So I don't think it should be that hard. And by the way, women love their cricket, you know, in the West Indies. They love their cricket and they know their cricket. Most of the young men you see coming through and playing for West Indies cricket, they would not be playing West Indies cricket if it were not for their mothers.
I agree.
I stopped.
Isn't Trinidad's head coach the female team? Is the former West Indies
Yeah,
player Aguilera, right?
Former captain.
yeah, Marissa
The
Aguilera. Yeah,
captain.
she was the former
Yeah.
West Indies captain. She's I think she
Yeah.
led she coached the under 19 team recently, if I'm not mistaken, too.
Yeah.
Mm.
The West Indies under 19 team to the
Well,
World Cup. But
that's good. I
yeah,
didn't know she was there. That's good. That's good.
but
And they won.
interesting thoughts on the term limits and governance as it relates to West Indies cricket. West Indies. There's one other thing that's came up recently, and especially with Dr. Shallow being elected, unopposed. I think his new term is supposed to begin on the 29th of this month, March, right? No one put their hands up to challenge him, and he went unopposed. With that being said, he's currently deeply involved in St. Vincent's politics, and I think he's running for office there, and it has caught the attention of Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, and there's been some things said in the media with regards to Dr. Shallow's running of West Indies cricket and St. Vincent being denied a game for the Australia tour. What are your thoughts on that? On Dr. Shallow running? You want to call that, or marrying both roles? His role in St. Vincent's politics and Cricket West Indies president, Sam.
I have no issue with Dr. Shallow running to become the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Absolutely no issue with that. And interestingly enough, Dr. Shallow's involvement in politics in his homeland, right, aligns with the idea of the chairperson of Cricket West Indies being in a non-executive role, right? So if we take the Webby report on its merit to say, look, we want to have chairperson instead of a president, and that person is divorced from the day-to-day management of Cricket West Indies, then Dr. Shallow can go about his business in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I have every respect for Comrade Ralph. I was lucky to listen to him give a speech. The first time I heard him speak, in 2005 in Guyana, there was a conference to mark the 25th death anniversary of Walter Rodney. And he gave an excellent speech. So I have no issues with Comrade Ralph. Yes, he has done quite a lot for this region in many spheres of our lives. But on this issue, I honestly think Comrade Ralph is bringing West Indies cricket into disrepute. Why is it Dr. Shallow can't do both things? Because obviously, should Dr. Shallow win the should Dr. Shallow win the elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, of course, he's going to step down as president of Cricket West Indies, right? That's without question. Here in the Caribbean, one of our problems is the lack of human resources. We don't have a sufficient number of skilled people who are putting up their hands to take up leadership in our various territories. So if you have an educated and skilled gentleman who says, look, I want to contribute to the development of my country, I don't see why not. And last point, there has always been a deep connection between national politics within CARICOM and cricket. Michael Manley of blessed memory wrote a book on West Indies cricket, a thick book, not a little pamphlet, a thick book. You see? So I have absolutely no issue with Dr. Shallow running to become Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And Comrade Ralph should have taken the high road and not make this an issue. That is my view.
I think he saw it as I thought it was a cheap shot, right? To lament the fact that St. Vincent didn't get any games when the Australia tour. You know, if you they say all things in politics is fair game, right? But I personally thought that was a cheap shot. But Walter, let's get your thoughts on, the little back and forth between Dr. Shallow and Dr. Gonsalves. Walter, you're mute.
Microphone, Walter. Microphone. So ask him the question back again. So you gotta edit out that part.
Yeah.
What? Go ahead.
That book that Sammy spoke about by Michael Manley, History of West Indies Cricket, and interesting enough, it had an introduction by Clive Lloyd, right? And in terms of I don't have a problem with. I can agree with Sammy. I don't have a problem with Mr. Shallow choosing to be part of the politics of his nation. And as Sammy said, one in every 10 university graduates leave the Caribbean, right? And that we have a migration problem. So if we have a young man and Mr. Shallow is a young man who wants to be part of politics, it's a good thing. Secondly, I think that let's say he wins, we will have someone on the inside of West Indies cricket who has West Indies cricket of heart, who could influence and have discussion with the other politicians around the Caribbean. Because I thought, with the exception of University of West Indies to an extent, I think West Indies cricket is the one unifying body, one unified institution in West Indies cricket. And if we have someone who is in the halls of power, who is rubbing shoulders with the various leaders, who could put West Indies cricket, who can help West Indies cricket develop in the various islands. Because one of the problems we have is that we need a unified development of West Indies cricket, where we have all through the territories true government involvement. And if we have a Shallow on the inside, it will help. So I don't know. Maybe Mr. Gonsalves feels threatened by a young Shallow.
I have a take on that. So here's the thing. I do think Dr. Gonsalves feels a bit threatened, because if he didn't think Dr. Shallow was worth his salt, he wouldn't have paid him any mind, right? That is one thing. The other thing is, the only worry I had with regards to Dr. Shallow trying to run for Cricket West Indies president and run for office in St. Vincent was, if someone or two other people had put their hands up and said, yeah, we are going to oppose you for the Cricket West Indies chairmanship or presidency, whatever you want to call it now, right? That could have gotten dicey for him. Luckily, no, I think he was just good enough that people was like, they were like, you know what, we'll let Dr. Shallow do this again. And no one opposed him. So he went up unopposed, and he will begin his new term come the 29th of this month. But I personally thought he was kind of pushing it if he tried to do both. I understand what both of you were saying, but that was where I am looking at it at. Had he been opposed, it could have gotten dicey for him, because in politics things get very dirty. and his opponents could have used a whole lot of things against him in that election for the Cricket West Indies presidency.
Interesting thought.
Yeah. So that's where I was looking. That's where I was looking at it from. Because I think it was 2023 when he took over from Ricky Skerritt, President Skerritt.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why President Skerritt stepped away was because of politics back in St. Kitts. Is it St. Kitts or Nevis? Right? And he wanted to help his party.
Lucia.
No, he's from either St. Kitts or Nevis. I can't remember which one it is.
Kitts.
Yeah. But he wanted to go back and get his party back in power. And he realized that he couldn't do both. So he had to make a choice with one. Right? That was one of the things that was quite important to him. So listen, I like Dr. Shallow. I like where he's going. There's still a lot to be done with regards to West Indies cricket. And before we wrap it up here tonight, I'm going to go into this. I'm going to touch on this, right? Just a little bit, and maybe on a different episode, we can home in on it. There are some things that Ricky Skerritt wanted to do back in the day. One of those things being revamping our professional cricket league, as they call it, right? Taking a holistic look at it. And that will be one of the things where Dr. Shallow will be judged on. Because as it stands right now, West Indies first class cricket is not fit for purpose. And I really hope that he takes a deep dive on it, because it needs to be addressed. We cannot continue as we're going right now. But anyways, fellas, really interesting thoughts on the two topics that we had tonight, term limits and the whole saga between Dr. Gonsalves and Dr. Shallow. I think St. Vincent politics is in a very interesting place. And as Sammy said, politics and West Indies cricket go hand in hand, right? We all agree on that. So even if Shallow is there and he goes Vincentian politics full time, it could still be to the goodness of West Indies cricket. Any closing thoughts from you, Sam?
When it comes to governance reform, while we have not gone as far as we should have gone, I am happy that at least there is movement. In life, things are not going to work out as great as we would want it to work. But very often it doesn't, But at least there is movement. So I'm happy about that. As I mentioned before, we see movement in terms of how our women cricketers are treated. That's a plus, you see. So I'm happy for that, but would still love to see deeper governance reform.
Yeah. Walter?
Yeah, as Sammy said, it's important for us to agree with proper government reform within West Indies cricket. And I'll also piggybacking on the last point you made about West Indies in terms of revamping the first class system. That's something that I'm always passionate about too. I think that there needs to be a connection between first class cricket, first division cricket, second division cricket in all the islands. I think also that throughout the islands we must have a unified cricket structure. Also important taking the smaller divided islands into consideration. So that needs to be that we need to have the conversation and put systems in place so that we could have a proper feeder system where people are not, but by the time people reach first class cricket, a lot of their problems have been ironed out. So I agree with you. So when we reach Test cricket, a coach don't have to fix our technical flaws. It's teaching us. We supposed to be, because we love cricket so much, and West Indies cricket is like family, because like we're doing right now, right? But when we reach Test cricket and reach international cricket, we have the finished product, and we can do it. We can do it.